So Misty and I have just gotten to know each other. We have just talked on the phone a couple nights ago, and it already was one of those conversations I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to try to cut this off because we could talk forever. I don't know if you felt that way.
I think we did, yeah. So otherwise we would have the dialogue over the phone and it would all be over.
I almost felt like we cannot say anything else because now we're going to have nothing to talk about on Saturday.
So we cut it off.
So, Misty, I would love to hear more from you. The word stance just feels weird. Like you're putting your stance in the mud. So I don't really know what other word to use, but I'd love to hear more about your heart in this conversation with the LGBT Christian community.
Okay. My church is the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, and so we're a pretty conservative denomination. I'm a Reformed Christian. Some people call us Calvinists, and so
You don't.
Coming from. Excuse me.
You don't call yourself a Calvinist?
I do. I'm comfortable with that label. Yeah. So the churches that I've been involved with have always been very, conservative, because I was a part of a, kind of a more fundamentalist church before I became Reformed. So I've always been in those circles. And so I've never really had it modeled to me how to have this kind of civil dialogue with people that I don't agree with, just because the emphasis was much more on the doctrine and, the teaching and what you should believe and what you shouldn't believe. And so when I began to become more interested in LGBT people and getting to know some of, their feelings of otherness and their feelings of exclusion from the church, this whole process has really helped me to understand how to really, like we were talking about, here on Level Ground, seeing beyond the differences and seeing people as made in the image of God, seeing people as Christians, seeing people as brothers and sisters in Christ. So this has been a pretty big personal journey for me. And, just as a straight person, I'm a homeschooler, I have 3 kids, and my husband was a pastor, and now he's an elder. I mean, my circles are very conservative. And yet I find that having really deep friendships with people who have different beliefs, as we talked about over the phone, is actually feels very secure for me, because then I know that our friendship is beyond just we agree on all the points. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And how about for yourself?
Yeah, I was thinking about what do I really think about this? Sometimes as a therapist, I get to have my own thoughts, but most of what I try to do is to help people figure out what the best them is. So I had to kind of go back to myself and remember, I thought being gay was a sin for a really long time and resisted that. Had friends praying with me through that process and fasting, all the things that you could imagine someone does when they fight against it. And then I had an experience that changed everything. And so it's sort of a funny experience because it actually was a kiss that changed everything for me. In that I'm a really sensitive person, which is really great as a therapist and probably pretty hard to be married to. But I knew that as far as what I believed is the conviction of the Holy Spirit, I knew what that felt like. I was connected to it. There wasn't, I knew when I was doing something that wasn't quite right. And so I thought to be with a woman would feel that way, like the worst conviction I'd ever had. So then I had my first kiss with a woman. Well, then that changed everything because I didn't feel that conviction. Instead, I felt peace, and it sounds kind of kooky, but I really felt the Spirit of God in that kiss, and it changed everything for me. And so that started the process for me of figuring out, okay, well, then what do I do with the Bible and How do I come out? Because as far as God goes, I know I'm okay. And in that, also realizing what it was like to have to live as a split person, it is an incredibly painful experience. Brings all kinds of symptoms. For me, it was depression. I had depression for a lot of years, and I thought that was just my personality. And then realizing, oh no, that's just because I was living this split life where I thought these parts of me couldn't be a part of me.
So by split life, do you mean like you had this one experience with God where you felt like he was affirming you, and then you had to go back to your church, which wasn't affirming you? Is that what you mean by split?
By split, I mean to reject parts of myself. So anytime that I felt any kind of attraction for a woman, like pushing that away, shaming myself, shutting it down. Which also then I lived as a closeted gay person, which also was a split experience, because some people knew and some people didn't. So there was lots of quick verbal editing that happened for a lot of years.
Right. See, I know a lot of gay Christians who say like that God led me to my partner, and God affirmed me when I expressed my sexuality that was true to myself. And as a person coming from where I'm coming from, I've learned to realize that those experiences are real. And so, hearing a testimony like that has really helped me over the years, because before I was thinking, I'm at a place right now where my theology doesn't have an exact space for that or an exact justification for those experiences. But just like when the apostles in Acts saw that the Gentiles were speaking in tongues and they didn't quite understand that transition, and they kind of affirmed that, oh well, I guess they're Christians. When I hear experiences from LGBT Christians that God is giving them these affirming experiences, that's been really helpful and challenging to me, because before I would have never expected, because my theology didn't have room to have to take those experiences seriously. But then over the years, I kind of realized that no, I do have to take those experiences seriously, and it's been really helpful for me in my friendships with people to do that and just realize that God is a God of diversity. That He doesn't give us all the same experiences and the same kinds of affirmations. Because I have other friends who say, well, when I had my first gay kiss, I didn't feel that same confirmation. And then I have to say, okay, well, I affirm that too. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So why do you trust it? How do you trust it? How do you know? Something that I hear often is this idea of, Candice, you wanted to feel that, so you did.
Mm-hmm.
How do you trust my story?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I hear that accusation a lot, like, oh, it's just a self-serving thing, and you just you don't have respect for the Word of God and all this sort of thing. And I just think I'm just not convinced that that's the case. I know that exists, that sometimes we do justify, we create a theology to justify our actions. I know that exists. But I just don't buy it, because I've just met too many godly people who disagree with me, who are affirming, and have an affirming theology that I can't get my mind around, but they're godly people. And I just think it's uncharitable to not make room for that and not recognize that these people love Christ. And so I have to humble my own mind and just realize that God has called these people to Himself, and they have different beliefs than me. So I'm just not willing to uncharitably write everybody off, as if everybody is just being self-serving in that way.
Yeah. I wish you were more arrogant and closed off. It'd make this much easier.
We can try to find. Maybe I can find something. We can have a bonfire or something.
Even when we were talking on the phone, I was just like, oh great, we're going to be friends. But
But well, maybe we should talk about some of the difficulties we've had. I mean, we do have difficulties with people that we disagree with, right? I mean, you know, I think that one of the questions was that we should be thinking about was, you know, when do you have trouble in disagreeing with somebody? And I mean, I have plenty of trouble disagreeing with people.
Who are those people?
You know, I was thinking about it, and I think it's difficult. I don't necessarily agree that when people talk about tolerance versus intolerance, I don't necessarily feel like these are absolute things. Like, well, I'm an intolerant person, you're a tolerant person, or vice versa, or something like that. I think that we all are intolerant and tolerant.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that I'm most intolerant when I feel like the basis of my relationship with somebody is different than their agenda for me. Like if my approach is we can agree to disagree on certain things that I feel are not that important, but if they have an agenda that says, no, our friendship is conditioned on agreeing on every single issue, then I think that we have a conflict of interest just in terms of having a relationship. And it's hard for me to see how you can have a relationship and when your agendas for the relationship itself are so different. And you know, I do have a hard time with that. I don't think it means as Christians we can't love. I think you should be able to love just about everybody. But I think friendship is a little bit different. So
The people that you find have agendas, is there usually more straight people or people in the queer community, or is that too much of a specific?
No, it's both.
Yeah.
It's both. Sorry, just blew into the mic. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten it from both sides. So it's a human thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, what about you? When do you feel that most tension in a relationship with somebody?
Yeah, similar. It's when the relationship isn't about us as people. It's about the issue that it becomes hard. It's funny because my whole family was at my wedding, and I have no idea what they believe about me being gay and a Christian. I mean, I know what my immediate family, my brother, my mom and dad think, but all my cousins, my grandparents, everybody was there. And I love it. Like, I really feel like I don't need to know what they believe because I know they love me and I love them. And it's about our relationship. So for me, it really is, if you can't let it be about us, then I'm going to be constantly triggered and upset, and it's exhausting. Who wants to be exhausted?
Do you think that that's ignoring differences, or do you think that that's, you know, a legitimate way to handle differences? How do you feel about that?
I don't know if it could be ignoring, and I'm really okay with that. At least with some people, especially my family. I don't know if it doesn't get in the way of love. I'm not sure what the point is to know. I mean, for me, it really is about loving. I'm sure there's stuff in their lives that I would totally disagree with, but I would rather just love them. I do have friends where we had to get to that place. It took, years of the difficult conversations for us to finally be like, okay, we've talked this through, we've read the books we each wanted the other to read, and we're still where we're at, and so now our relationship gets to be just about loving each other and knowing each other. And you're going to ask me about my wife, and I'm going to ask you about your husband, and we're gonna do this.
Mm-hmm. Admittedly, for me, it's not really fair that I'm coming from this place where I sound very open-minded and everything like that, but I don't have a relationship that's at stake like you do. If I was in a relationship where that was an issue all the time that I had to deal with, I think that I might be coming off a little bit differently, because the fact is that when I'm straight, I don't have to deal with the kind of hurts that I'm sure you and your wife have to deal with all the time. Is how I'm curious to know, I don't know many lesbian couples who have children like you do, and you told me you have twins who are almost 2 years. And I'm just curious to know how things are at your church and how you fit in your church, if at all, under those circumstances.
Yeah, it took some time to find a place, a church, and we love our church. It was not our first option by any means. We wanted to go to a place that had more families our age, and we found a place that does, but it was not easy making those calls to the churches to see if we were welcome to come and be a part of their community, and hearing, not really, kind of ish. No one's gonna, there's not a bouncer at the door, but, couldn't really be involved. And we are lucky enough that we haven't lost very many friends. We absolutely have lost friends. And it's confusing, those lost friendships. Some of them, it's been years and years and years, and we are still trying to wrap our minds around, was it that we are gay, or was it that we had to lie to them for so many years, and their feelings of betrayal in that. So probably both. I have one friendship that I actually ended, and I feel really sad about it. Actually, I ended the friendship probably 12 years ago, and I still feel so sad because I was in such a raw, vulnerable place within my process that her feelings and anger and upsetness about me being gay, I couldn't take it. I couldn't hold it. It was too much, and so I was like, listen, I can't be your friend. And we'd been friends for a lot of years. I have tried to reconcile that friendship, but it hasn't worked. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've lost a lot of friends too.
Yeah, but you're right. It is a mental game. Even when Sam asked me to do this, I was like, oh God, this sounds really vulnerable, and I have to talk to someone about all this stuff. No, call somebody else. Because to meet someone new, even I take my kids to the park. Every day I'm like, okay, I have to do this sort of mental checklist of self-soothing verbiage where I remind myself that I'm good and okay, and having to educate people along the way. Oh, your husband this or that. I have a wife.
Yeah. Body language is so important. And frankly, when you're straight, and you don't meet that many gay people, it's part of learning how to be, opening your eyes to people's life situations, everything is the body language. You just kind of learn to look, it's not just about body language. It's having a mindset where you just realize that, that people all have different life situations, and it's not quite the same, I think, as society saying, oh, just political correctness. And I feel like a lot of straights, myself included, just are feeling boxed in with sort of behavior codes, don't be insensitive, and don't do that double take when you find out it's a lesbian couple, and don't, this kind of thing.
Which I do. I'm like, hello, look, there's two girls holding hands. So you can totally do it.
Yeah. But I find that it's so much more than that. It's as a Christian, it's more about real understanding, real empathy, and real getting to know people. And I think that's what makes Christianity different, more than just straitjacketing your behavior, and more than just following society's norms and everything. That you really have to, have that empathy. But I think that especially with me, I have a lot of gay friends, but the people that I see every day are my straight friends at church and my family members. And sometimes if you're not making the effort to keep in touch with people who are gay and supporting my friends and supporting their situations, I forget. I forget that, oh yeah, that's, this issue has come up, or that. And it's really, it's really tough. I mean, here I am, like, I've written and I've read and I've spoken and everything, and I find a lot of times I'm just sort of, yeah, okay, I have to be sensitive, and it's not always in my
sensitive
world.
to what, do you think?
I think when you're in LGBT, in the community, there's always an evolution of change. Like there's always, or evolution of change. There's always change going on. Things are always evolving, and issues are always evolving. And sometimes, honestly, I just get tired of keeping up. I think we're talking a lot about gender now, and a lot about, binary and everything. And I'm just sort of like, okay, when do I want to read that book? Because it really is about that. It really is about, I don't always know somebody who's, dealing with maybe genderqueer issues or something, or someone, I don't know that many transgender people, or maybe I don't know people who are gay who are dealing with certain situations. I don't know many gay couples with children, for instance. And sometimes you're just like, okay, well, there's this book that came out, or this blog that everyone's talking about, and sometimes I just don't feel like, reading it because I'm just caught up in my own life, And so I find it challenging as a Christian to just, to not have sort of a fatigue about it, and to really be faithful to the command to love and to have your heart open. But, sometimes it's just not there.
Is that why you're in this conversation? Because of the command to love?
It's not, I put it that way. I like to say the command to love because I always like to remind people who are conservatives that, we're always talking about obedience, right? It's a command, right? And so I like to juxtapose those two things. Because I think a lot of people in my church think that people who talk about love are liberals, And you're just like kind of this mushy, like you don't really care about doctrinal precision and those kind of things. So I like to say the command to love. But for me, it's more than that. It's really about like the first time, and I told you about this. The first time back in 2000. So this is how many years ago? Like 15, 16 years ago. When I first thought, I'm gonna evangelize to those gay people, and I'm gonna like learn who they are because they just really need to hear the gospel. And I started picking up gay literature and reading, and the very first thing I read was somebody's coming out story, and just realizing that, well, this is not a choice.
Do you remember what you read that popped out to you as like the aha of that?
It was Andrew Sullivan's introduction to this book he wrote on same-sex marriage, and it was when he talked about his childhood. It was when it wasn't like, see, the way that it was presented to me was, people are making these perverse sexual choices, which implies that they're like older people, which implies that they have an agenda to reject God and to rebel against God and so forth. But when he started talking about feelings he had when he was 8, or I had no idea why I felt this way, but I just thought maybe I wasn't a boy, and then he went to the library and he started looking up like pictures of the human physique, like, yeah, I'm a boy, things like this. And not even having a label, not even having language to describe what it was that he was experiencing, that was so impactful for me. It was really, really impactful because I remember doing something similar when I was a teenager. Actually, I don't think I've really talked about this in public before, but when I was a teenager, I had an eating disorder. And it was more the anorexia type, it was not the bulimic type. And I went to the library and I picked up a book like, is this curable? And all the books said it wasn't. I don't know, I was looking at the wrong books. And I was just sort of like, I'm stuck with this, like it was these deep psychological issues and it scared me, And I remember going to the library, biking there, and looking it up. And didn't tell my parents, didn't say anything to anybody, and just looking this up and going, oh my gosh, I'm so, like my life is just over. And Andrew Sullivan had this similar experience, and I related to it so well. I was just like, whoa, this is, I know exactly what he's going. He had no label for it. He had no language for it. And how do you explain that? Like, how do you explain that like, is this really the homosexual agenda? I was like, yeah, he's really on this agenda, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And I think that what's so impactful for me is when, it's so surprising to me when you talk to people who are LGBT and you think that you're not going to be able to connect or relate, but then you find these points of connection and relating, and it's like from like some other world, you know, like you just had no idea that you can really, you know, that God put something in your life, maybe so that you can make that connection. So no, to me it's not just about a command to love, but I can tell you that when I went back and I looked at the Gospels and I looked at the command to love, it just made a lot more sense to me.
Thanks for telling us your story. So what do you tell your friends that are in the LGBT community about your church? Like, because, you know, most of the time it's like, you should invite people to church. This is a Christian thing to do.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, like, you know, a couple of women came up to me at the GCN conference in January where I was speaking, and they were like, you know, what would it be like if we came and visited your church? And I had to tell them, you know, I don't think you would go over very well, you know? And it kind of made an impact on me because I was just thinking, yeah, you know, that's what I have to say about, you know, my church. It's not that...
what was it like when you said that? Like, what was it like for you?
It made me feel bad, you know, because... and at the same time, it was just kind of the reality of the fact that we're not really even discussing this, you know, in our denomination. And I just thought, wow, you know, like, this is probably on the horizon, you know? And it's kind of scary to me to think about, you know, having my denomination enter into this discussion, because I've seen other denominations do it, and it's just like, it's so divisive, and it's so emotional, and I think that's kind of why perhaps, you know, our denomination isn't. But at the same time, when somebody comes up and says they really want to come to your church, you just want to say yes. You know, I didn't want to see anybody hurt. I think I'd rather be hurt. I'd rather be the one who's hurt than invite somebody and see them hurt. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to when I don't have a sense of my future, or I don't have a sense of where things are going in the future. So yeah.
Like, for you personally, you don't know where things are going in the future for your church, and so you don't know if you'll be still part of that wherever it goes, or what do you mean?
Yeah, it's our church is, you know, we're very traditional, like I said. We still believe in the traditional roles for men and women. So I'm not like, we don't have male pastors, or we don't have female pastors, we don't have female elders.
I was going to say, no men pastors. Well,
we don't have female.
I'm totally going there.
Demons, yeah. Right. And so, you know, and the last denomination I was a part of.
That might even be more triggering for me than like anything you've even said up until this point. So, as a woman.
But you know what? I like our church. I am a traditionalist. You know, I feel very comfortable in our church.
So mind blowing.
Yeah, I fully accept traditional women's roles. You know, and I think I have more of an issue of the way that some men might conduct themselves or might treat me. You know, and under those circumstances, than I do with the view itself. And because the men in our church are such servants, and you know they're such capable leaders and everything, I really feel comfortable in our church, and I really don't have a problem with our traditional roles. But I think that, yeah, I think that like at the same time, these issues, you know, and gender roles and everything kind of go hand in hand. If you're conservative in one, you're conservative in another. And my hope is, of course, that, you know, when we do talk about it, that it could be in a way that preserves unity and respect. But at the same time, I'm not an ordained leader in our church. And, and actually in our church, I have never taught formally about these things, even though I teach women's Bible study, I teach at women's retreats and all this kind of thing. I've chosen not to teach on it and use a platform for that because I just feel that would not be appropriate. And I was asked by my pastor to actually teach a Sunday school once. But I don't believe in teaching men formally. So I said no. He wanted me to teach on, how can we, understand gay people better. And so I said no, but then we worked it out where I didn't have to teach from scriptures. I could just sort of share my testimony and this sort of thing. And so because it was comfortable for me to do, I didn't feel like I was being all authoritative or whatever, then I did it. But I just feel that I need to be very respectful. And I feel that I need to, I don't know, it sounds kind of funny, but know my place, Yeah. And I'm super comfortable with that. Yeah. And so if people at my church want to consult with me, that's great. But if they don't, then I'm just gonna watch things happen.
Not sure what to say.
Well, you can disagree with me, and then we can have a little dialogue about it.
That sounds horrible. Just kidding. I think what's surprising is just the little bit that I've gotten to know you. You're such a thoughtful person with a powerful voice. And to me, I think, my gosh, that just shouldn't be limited. It should be, spoken to. Men and women can benefit from you and the gifts that you have. So that's why it's sad and surprising for me. But at the same time, you don't seem conflicted about it, and so I will do the work of hearing you and accepting that about you. I think what would be hard for me is if then you tried to say that was true for me as well. I know that I wouldn't be welcome in your church to preach or do anything like that, but if you said that it was wrong for me to go to a place that it was okay, that would be really painful.
Yeah, I mean, I have, friends who are women in the ministry. And so I think that, this whole experience I've had with, getting to know gay and lesbian Christians and so forth has really helped me with this issue. Because, if a woman says, well, I feel called by God to preach, what am I going to say? And I'm just like, okay, and I recognize that, on the other end of the women's and men's roles issue is the issue of spirituality and giftedness, I think is what I've talked about. And so, I recognize that there are women who, they feel called to preach, and that's just, to me, it falls into the same category where it's like, okay, well, we agree to disagree, but I certainly can support what your experience is with the Spirit's leading. But don't ask me to preach, So.
Yeah. As we were talking, my mind was kind of going back to the phone call that we had. And you talked a little bit about how the possibility of your ethnicity also playing a role in why you're interested in this conversation as far as I was wondering, I'd love to hear more about that. Your connectedness, even in your idea of women's roles, but more specifically within the LGBTQ conversation, where does your ethnicity come into that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what Candice and I talked about was that, my family, I'm a fourth generation Japanese American, and so my whole dad's side of the family was, in the camps during World War II, and my dad actually was a toddler, and he remembers being, in the barracks in the fenced-in area, And I think he even remembers like being threatened by a guard at one time, you know. But so he has memories of that whole experience. And you know, basically being treated as other, you know, because my family was Japanese American. It's always been just sort of in the air, you know. And unlike, you know, other people's experiences, like a lot of people have had experiences of, you know, being discriminated against because of their ethnicity or their race or whatever. With us, Japanese Americans, I think with a lot of us, the thing is like a lot of our families just didn't talk about it. My grandfather never talked about it until the apology from the government came in the early 90s. I think it was the early 90s or the late 80s, around there. So I became very good at reading between the lines, I think. I think as Asians, there's always that unspoken thing, like you don't say certain things and so you're expected to read between the lines. But when you have like a history of your entire family going through something like that, and it really kind of tore our family up. And, you know, there was a lot of tensions that resulted from that experience that never got resolved within our family. Because different people viewed that experience differently, and it was so deeply hurtful that if your family members can't even be on the same page about certain things, then that becomes deeply hurtful, and you carry that for generations on. And so it was more than just spending like 3.5 years in a camp. It affects your entire family and it affects your entire community. And so, you know, we were just talking about how maybe that experience kind of has informed me about what it's like to be, you know, a minority in any situation, a sexual minority or other or anything like that. And frankly, sometimes I don't really think about it too much, because when I had that experience, when I read Andrew Sullivan's testimony, to me it was just like, boom, like I recognized so many things. And maybe that is because of my family's experience. Sometimes I think, oh, you know, read this, and I show this to my straight friends, and they don't get it, and I just think, don't you know what's going on here? Maybe other people haven't had those experiences, and I have a sensitivity that enables me to see things that are not spoken. So yeah, it could be that, you know, maybe God puts certain sufferings in your life to create compassion and understanding. People ask questions all the time about why does God, you know, allow us to suffer? To me, it seems like, you know, these are lessons that, you know, we can connect later on in life with how we might understand somebody else better. So yeah, that was, you forced me to think about that, and so I do kind of wonder if that makes me who I am, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't know what it's like being I'm a white woman, obviously. It's not obvious to everybody. But there's, I'm trying to remember certain phrases or certain things that you even just said that I thought, gosh, yeah, those same phrases apply to being queer, absolutely.
Like what would you?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was more of just like a feeling of, I don't know, but maybe the not talking about it. In my coming out process, you know, I didn't come out to all of my family at the same time. Come out to my mom, and like 5 years later tell my dad, and then, you know, three more years tell this person. And so there's lots of not talking about it, and lots of people not wanting me to talk about it, and yet reading between the lines and feeling that tension. Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, my family would talk about, you know, going to school. Like my parents, when they went to school, they felt like, you know, they were on the losing side, quote unquote, because, you know, the United States won the war and Japan lost the war. And it was just kind of disconcerting to be like, it wasn't like they were really identifying with Japan. They consider themselves Americans, and yet they were expected to be like the losers, you know? And so there's just a lot of tensions that went on where it was just kind of misunderstanding upon misunderstanding upon misunderstanding, and feeling like now you're forced to have to feel inferior, regardless of whether you actually felt you deserved to feel inferior or not.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely they did not, and neither does anyone in the LGBTQ community. So, connection there for sure. That must have been horrible to be them. Transitioning a little bit, you have kids and I have kids.
That's right.
And you said you don't know many other same-sex couples with kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what do you, like, I'm so curious what you think about me. Did you Google me? Did you look at my Facebook? Were you like, look like, oh, that's what it looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if I were to just meet you and go, oh, you and your wife and you have kids and everything, I think probably the last thing I would want to do is ask you all the details about, like, how did you get kids and what did you do to get kids? I mean,
is that what came to your mind?
It comes to mind only because what I've done is I've done sort of like reading, like, how do gay couples get kids? Do they get it through adoption, or how do you get the sperm donor kind of thing? So I read all the options, and then when I meet somebody, I just want to sort of know, like, well, there's like a number of ways, but I'm not gonna like sit there and ask you. So that's one of the things that I would probably avoid, like the play.
Why do you think so many straight people want to know that?
I don't know. I mean, straight people want to know a lot of weird things.
That people want to know.
Straight people want to know a lot of weird things. Like, I saw this one comedy film, like, about these. I don't know if you saw this on Facebook or whatever. This gay man, this gay couple, and what it's like to be a gay couple. And then somebody's saying, oh, I've never had a gay friend before. Can I be your friend? And, oh, can I come to your wedding? I've never been to a gay wedding before. We don't know you, And, oh, I have this gay cousin. Do you know him? It's just like, made no sense, whatsoever. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just people are just naturally curious, just because, like, well, obviously you didn't have kids the way we have kids, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, now you're talking about somebody's personal life, and so sometimes, in some cases, the curiosity just overrides the social norms. Yeah, so, but I think that, when I meet a couple with kids, I sort of assume that, like, I know that for me, being a parent kind of just suddenly transforms you into being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be this mother, and I want my kids to view me a certain way, and I want certain things for them. And a lot of people who maybe have left the church may want to, like, come back to the church because of their kids and so forth. And so sometimes I view being a parent as being like, it has this sort of way to make people a little bit more conservative, because all of a sudden you're kind of thinking in this other way. You're not just thinking of yourself as being like, I have parents, but now you're viewing yourself as, I'm a parent, And I'm just mainly curious to know if you felt that way. Do you feel like having kids has made you more conservative, like more like it's changed you? Or is it sort of like, no, I'm just going to do things totally different, because now I have kids and now I can
be a radical mom.
That's right, just totally. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's made me more conservative. I'm like, they will not know about what I was like as, in college, as a young person. I mean, yes and no, but it really has, absolutely. And even when our kids were born, I was like, we need to get them baptized, and we need to start going to church. And my wife was like, why?
So are you saying that you and your wife reacted differently to?
Very differently.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, she grew up as a Christian. She is a Christian. Those symbols, I don't want to speak for her, but I think because being a lesbian, she's experienced so much pain that it wasn't a place she wanted to take our family. She was like, we have lots of friends in the community, and we can introduce God and a spirituality to our kids that way. But for me, those symbols, I think I was able to work through my personal pain differently than her, and those symbols were huge for me. So she was on board, and we found a church, and we go to church. We have not baptized them just because, it's a whole process, and so I'm sure that we will, but it is interesting to meet lots of families, just going to the playground, and even yesterday I met this little girl that I couldn't figure out, is she a little girl or a little boy? And she wasn't like a baby, babies, a lot of babies you can't tell, but she was like probably 7 or 8. And then I decided, okay, it was like a situation where I had to say their gender. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna say he, and then the mom came over and said, oh, she loves blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, and I just felt like this cringe and knowing this little girl must get that all the time. And I wanted to be like, listen, at this playground, I get stuff like that all the time about being a gay mom. So for me, not only is it this sort of conservatism of like trying to protect them, but trying to figure out how to frame all of this for them, not wanting them to be rejected or have someone on the playground be like, hey, you already said you had a mom, and who's that lady over there? And I'm sure that will happen. Or the elementary school that they go to, it's just like a block away, that's an amazing school, and yet there, huge sign like father-daughter dance.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. Yeah.
And so Crystal and I were like, what are we gonna do? Like, one, I can't believe there are father-daughter dances. It feels so like 1954 or something. Weird promise ring, your dad gives you a promise ring type of experience. But also, like, men are important, and we have men in our kids' lives, and it's not that we want our kids to have memorable, special moments with men in their life, but what are we going to do when the father-daughter dance comes? We have no idea. I don't know.
Have you had to deal with, your kids being friends with other kids, and then it's sort of like, the other parent is explaining, oh, they have 2 mommies kind of thing? Is that come up?
And people have been mostly really kind about it. And so that's been really nice to the older kids. Like, oh, they have, just like you said, they have 2 moms. And most of the kids, it's really sweet. They're just like, what? What do you mean? Well, that's how some families are. Mm-hmm. And we have lots of different books that we read to our kids, books about lots of different kinds of families, not just families like ours. And so trying to even just help them open their minds that there is so much diversity out there, and it's actually really beautiful.
Yeah, my kids are older. They're 18 and 15 and 9. And I find that they're growing up with, gay classmates and, seeing same-sex relationships in the public schools and everything. And, just thinking about being a parent, it actually brings a different issue for me, because like I was talking to my 15-year-old just the other night, and she was literally like, yeah, I don't see any issue with gay couples or anything like that. And, I actually had mixed feelings about that, because, she's raised in the church, and I just thought that she would have some sense of like, well, there is like kind of this debate going on where, some people take this side and some people take that side. But she seemed to be kind of unaware that there was any issues, And I was sort of like, well, there are some issues with the Bible, And so it's, there's definitely this generational thing happening where, I have these mixed feelings as a parent, because on one hand, I want society to be more open, to LGBT people. I just think it would just be so much better if we just stopped fighting about it. But at the same time, I'm still conservative. And conservative means that you're the type of person who kind of says, it's not that you always do what was done before, but you kind of view the things that society has done before as being sort of like, a lot of people have experienced this and a lot of people have affirmed this way of doing things. And when you change things, you just want to be careful about what you change. You want to make sure that, you're not just throwing everything out from behind. And
Is that what you feel like your daughter's done?
Pardon?
Is that what you feel like your daughter has done?
I kind of feel like that's sort of the cultural environment in which my kids are growing up, where there's so much change going on that just in general, as a conservative person, it's hard for me to cope with everything. I'm just that typical, wanting my kids to grow and wanting my kids to be their own person and wanting them to have their own opinions even if they disagree with me. But I've always been the type of person that's when it comes to the tried and true, and a lot of people have experienced this and a lot of people have affirmed that this works for them, I'm so loath to let go of that, whether it's our theology or whether it's the way we run church or whether it's the way society has done things. And I would just rather be careful about changing as opposed to there's other people who have the makeup of the freedom thing, let's go out and explore, let's be adventurous, let's be free, And I have a lot of friends like that, but it's just not me, So I as a parent, it's I feel that tension. And it's not like the worst thing in the world, but I just kind of recognize that, that's kind of a point of tension with my generation and my kids' generation.
So you probably, I don't know if you've ever been asked this, but I'm sure you've thought about it. So what if one of your kids comes out?
Actually, I've thought about it a lot. If one of my kids comes out, I would probably just tell them the first thing you should do is to be the best Christian you can. Follow God, follow Christ. And the reason is that I just know so many people who have done that, and God has led them in so many different, paths. And, the last thing I want to do is to say anything that puts that wedge between themselves and Christ. So, all my kids get that talk, that you follow Christ. My second daughter, the 15-year-old, I remember when she was, I think she was 3 or something, and I just told you about my view of women's roles, right? Well, she'd set up a pulpit in her room, and she'd have her older sister in the audience. No, I think her older sister was playing the piano. And she would open up her Bible, and then she'd come to me and say, she'd go with her hands behind her back, she'd go, "Mommy, girls can preach." I don't know where she got this idea.
It's so freaking cool.
And I just said, okay. And right then and there, I'm like, okay, I might be dealing with my daughters growing up and preaching.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay.
So you didn't say,
let's go.
"Oh, sweetie, that's really cute and everything, but da 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 da." You just said, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I did, actually. I sucked it up, but I was just like, this is so early, But yeah, I mean, that, parenthood.
Do a lot of parents reach out to you? A lot of work that I do is with parents or helping people help their parents.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you must have a lot of parents reach out to you about their kids coming out. Well, what do you tell them?
It's difficult because especially, parents who are in different situations with their churches, or maybe maybe their child just came out, or maybe their child came out a while ago, weddings and, these sort of things. I frankly feel kind of inadequate because I feel like being a parent is just different. It's just different because, sometimes as a parent, you think you love your kids with Christian love, but you really love them with parent love. And what I mean by that is that it's not the same thing, because sometimes as parents, we love our kids because our own self-interest is so wrapped up in them. Our own dreams are wrapped up in them. And the love that Christ calls us to is so much about dying to yourself, And I find that as a parent, that's just the hardest thing, is just to die to yourself when it comes to loving your kids. And for the most part, I think parental love is kind of modeled to us as being like, no, you're gonna guide your kid according to what you think is best for them. We say, I know what's best for you, that kind of thing. But that's tricky because what's best for them may be just maybe your own pride or your own dreams wrapped up in your child, and not necessarily, the love that Christ calls us to, which is that sometimes loving your child means almost like you feel like you're taking your heart and just ripping it out of your chest. It feels that bad. We're just like, okay,
All the time.
I've got to, and so I feel inadequate sometimes to counsel parents because I just know that there's something so deep there, and I really appreciate ministries where parents parents reach out to other parents, and I think that's something kind of special. I am a little bit more used to supporting people on the kids' side of the, where when kids have problems with their parents and everything, I definitely feel on a surer footing than on the other side of it. It may sound strange because I'm straight, but yeah, I definitely feel more sure-footed being on that side of it.
Do you think you're afraid of judgment from them?
Judgment from other
straight parents? Yeah.
I've gotten it before, not necessarily from straight parents, but I've gotten it before where I was like trying to encourage some friend of mine to just try to be more understanding of this gay friend or whatever, and then something blows up, and then I get it, it's like, I know what you're going to say, you're going to tell me to be more patient, and then I just get ripped on, and that sometimes is kind of, like, here you are trying to be a peacemaker, and then you end up getting it, I don't think that's happened in this specific area with parents, but I definitely know that, for straights, whether you're your parents or whether you're a friend or whether you're a pastor, it's just a big process. And I really try to strike this balance of, you got to kind of bring people along in a way that is their pace, but at the same time, when you see people getting hurt, like gay family members and friends, it's just like, it's painful. It's painful to be in a situation where you see two people hurting each other, and you kind of know exactly why that's going on, but you just know that the growth is not there yet. So yeah, it's not easy sometimes.
Absolutely. I think we're at our time.
It was fast.
Yeah, it was fast. Thanks for talking with me.
This has been fun.
Yeah.
Wish we had fought more, but
Next time.
Thanks, Candice.